So just kind of letting you know what's happening with greenhouse gases in our atmosphere and what's happened in the past. And although I say greenhouse gases, really looking at carbon dioxide. Now let's think about the entire world. And let's think about what country around the world has the most amount of greenhouse gas emissions. You can think of it to yourself. You might even want to write down your guess. I'm a huge trivia person, so I just love guessing. But think about which country has the most carbon dioxide that is literally leaving their country and entering our atmosphere. So I'm actually going to show you this really cool graphic, and feel free to play with it, especially if you're into history or into social sciences. This is a pretty fun graphic to play with. So here I have a world map, and what it's going to map is the amount of carbon dioxide, total amount of carbon dioxide that is being released around the world. So here's 1860, and you're going to see a couple of different countries. So the big ones are kind of labeled, and you can kind of watch how these evolve. So United Kingdom started this out, and that's because they underwent their industrial revolution first. They were using coal first. They were using oil and natural gas first, and they were using it a lot as they started industrializing. Well, then the Industrial Revolution hit the United States, and then we kind of exploded from there, and we ruled the world, so to speak, when it came to these greenhouse gas emissions, specifically looking at carbon dioxide. So let's keep playing this. And what do we notice? So I'm going to let it play through again. We're the world leader in the amount of carbon dioxide. But it's actually fairly recent. Let me zoom in a little bit more. And look what's happening with China. China very recently has actually surpassed the United States and is growing and growing and growing. So it's actually China that's currently ruling the world in the total amount of emissions. So here's the United States, here's China, but despite that, China has a lot more people than us. China has over about 4 times the amount of people as the United States. But if you look at the size of our circles, their circle isn't 4 times bigger than us. So that's one part of the puzzle is, okay, who's releasing the most? But the thing is that only tells you one aspect of it. Another thing we could look at is which country is leading per capita. Per capita, it really depends on kind of the scenario you're talking about, but per capita usually means per person. Depending on the metric, it really could mean like per state, it could mean per family, per house, etc. But in this case, we're referring to per person. So the question is which country leads per person in greenhouse gas emissions? I'll tell you right now, it's not China. China's actually pretty low. Yeah, they emit a lot, but they got 1.3 billion people that are splitting that carbon dioxide. So this map is showing us the biggest per capita. So how much is each person contributing? And here's China. China's looking great. China's pretty low. But take a look at some of our big culprits. United States, Canada, Australia. Oh God, I should know these a little bit better. But the one I do want to point out, the one I do know, is this guy. So this guy, this is Qatar. So Qatar is actually the worst offender. They have the highest level of carbon dioxide emissions in the world on a per person basis. And the reason is a couple reasons why. In Qatar, the electricity is actually subsidized. So for some people, it's actually free, so they don't have to pay for their power bill. If you don't have to pay for their power bill, you can use as much as you like to. Or the other problem that's going on there is they just use as much as they'd like to. It's a very rich country, a lot of oil money there, so they build extravagant things. That's actually a big thing in these countries around here, is that they build ski resorts in the middle of a desert, which use a lot of energy. So I will say America is not the worst. We don't have the most emissions. We also don't have the most per capita, but we're not doing so great. We're like number 2 on both of those lists. So I always say when thinking about climate change, the most important thing is the total amount, right? It doesn't matter if it on a per person basis, it matters how much is in the atmosphere. But when it comes to laws, when it comes to regulations, it's a lot easier to look at it on a per capita basis. So let's bring it a little bit closer to home. Let's take a look at the United States. Of our 50 states, which one is leading in emissions? Now, we're going to look at it a per capita basis because we don't really want to think about like one state versus another, and some of them have huge populations. So let's look at it per capita. So you might be making some guesses. Some common guesses I usually get in my other classes are New York, you get California. I mean, yeah, you got a lot of people, that's a lot of cars. Surprisingly though, they are at the bottom of this list. Here's New York. Here's California. Nearly at the very bottom. DC is at the bottom of this list. And the key here is per capita. People think, oh, New York City, there's a lot of pollution, or Los Angeles or San Francisco, a lot of pollution. But that's not really the case. Or it is the case, but there's a lot of people splitting that. In New York, people live in apartment buildings. Apartments are a lot more efficient than standalone houses. In New York, people don't drive. Everyone's using public transportation. So although, yes, there might be quite a bit of pollution because there's a lot of people there, people are splitting that pollution. And they actually are a lot more efficient than other areas. Maryland's not doing too bad. We're pretty low on this list as well because we do have a lot of big cities, and that kind of helps us out. Our worst offenders are those that you probably would not have guessed, Wyoming being the worst one. There's a couple of reasons for this. One, no one lives in Wyoming. Literally, there are more people in the city of Baltimore than in the whole state of Wyoming. So what that means is that people probably live far away from each other. So if they want to visit one another, they've got to drive a pretty long distance. It's also cold in Wyoming, so you have a lot of heating costs. Also, Wyoming produces a lot of energy. And because they produce a lot of energy, that makes electricity pretty cheap, meaning people are more likely to use more electricity because it's not that much of a cost for them. The same can be true for North Dakota and West Virginia as well. It kind of explains their high trends. So what I expect you to know, I don't expect you to know this list. What you should know is that New York, California, and DC pretty low on the list, and reasons why. We've got big cities, but they're apartments, a lot of public transportation. You should know that Wyoming, North Dakota, and West Virginia are on the other end of the spectrum. They have the highest emissions because people live far away from each other. These places are typically colder, and these are also big mining states, which means energy and electricity are cheap. So people don't really care if they're using a lot. So it's really important to kind of understand what these emissions are looking like around the world, because these emissions are going to give us an idea of what's happening and really how we can address them. You should know which states and which countries are releasing the most. You should know the difference between the most that's being polluted versus the most being polluted on a per capita basis, because that's going to have a lot of implications for laws as well. So with that, now that we kind of understand what's happening with our greenhouse gases, we can actually explore what's happening with climate change and what exactly climate change is.